All right. Well, let's get started. Welcome everybody to tonight's edition of Sappy Hour. For those of you new to Sappy Hour, I'll explain what it's all about in about 30 seconds here. But I just wanted to let everybody know the meeting is being recorded. So don't worry about frantically taking notes or anything like that. If there's something that you missed or you want to come back to, it will be up on our Atlas YouTube channel. The presentation tonight is all about point counts, and it's going to be about a 20-minute presentation or so, and then we'll have lots of time at the end for questions about point counts, but also any questions you might have about the Atlas in general. We are also streaming onto Facebook, so hello to everybody in Facebook land. For those of you who are on the Zoom, please type your questions in the Q&A. If you have any issues, use the chat function. And then just a little bit more about the Sappy Hour. So Sappy Hour is a play on Happy Hour, with the play being Sammy the Sapsucker is our Atlas logo. We try to have one about once a month, and we're excited to have these as a way for us to give you short information bursts, but also a chance for you to ask us questions about the Atlas. I am Mike Burrell. I'm the Atlas coordinator based in Peterborough, and I'll let Kaylin say hi real quick.
Hi everyone, I'm Kaylin. I'm the Atlas project manager and I coordinate alongside Mike. Great to have you.
Yeah, so we're going to be your hosts tonight for our Sappy Hour, all about point counts. So before we get into the presentation, we'd just like to start off with a land acknowledgement. Although we're joining from all over Ontario, we are all situated on Indigenous treaty lands and traditional territories. I'm currently in the Peterborough area, which is located on the Treaty 20 Michisagi territory and on the traditional territory of the Michisagi and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. Since Atlas III is a province-wide initiative, there are many diverse Indigenous communities, territories, and treaty lands where we live, work, or undertake our atlasing. As birders, we have a strong connection to the land. We see the daily changes happening, especially this time of year, but we also see the changes that are happening over our lives, some of them not so good. Our strong connection to the natural world is even more reason to recognize and reflect upon whose land you are on in your own regions. If you'd like to explore that, Kaylin's going to pop a link into the chat. Okay, so with that, Kaylin's going to share the slides, and I'm going to do the first bit of the slides, and then Kaylin's going to take over and give me a break. Okay, and you're going to have to hear the annoying, Kaylin and I have not fully mastered mind reading or anything, so you're going to have to listen to me annoyingly say next slide here and there, but our presentation is all about point counts. There we go. She did a pretty good job that time. So our outline for tonight is what is a point count. Then we're going to talk about traditional point counts, time and distance intervals. Then we're going to hand things over to Kaylin, who's going to talk about digital point counts. One of the new things related to those being our Zoom logs, and then some additional resources that are out there if we leave you wanting more. And then, of course, there'll be lots of time at the end for questions. No, you're good. So point counts in a nutshell. What is a point count? So a point count really is just basically going out and standing in a predetermined location and counting all the birds you're able to see or hear during a set period of time. When we're talking about the Atlas, they're done during peak breeding season, which for those of you in Southern Ontario starts this Friday, May 24th, and those of you further north starts June 1st. So we're right on the edge. That's why we're talking about point counts today. They're very important because they allow us to quantify how populations are changing over time, how the relative abundance varies across a landscape, and gives us a way to estimate actual population sizes for many species, because they're a little more standardized than our general atlasing. So just to go back, in Atlas 2, which we did 20 years ago, we did collectively 68,000 point counts, which is still kind of mind-boggling. It was the first North American breeding bird atlas to use point counts at all. So we really were trailblazers on this one. And this gave us an amazing ability to look at relative abundance for the first time for most species that are detected on point counts. So I've got 3 maps up here showing 3 different species. You don't need to know what they are, but what they are showing us is different patterns of abundance. And this was all calculated from point counts in Atlas 2. Atlas 3, we're well on our way to completing just as many or even more point counts. I think last time we looked, we were just about at 40,000 point counts. We'll probably cross 40,000 like on Friday or Saturday is my guess. So we're just shy of the 40,000. So we're doing really well when it comes to point counts. Next slide. So just as a quick reminder, we have different coverage goals. So when we talk about completing a square, getting adequate coverage, we mean we want to get 20 hours of effort during that peak breeding season. So starting on Friday in some parts of Southern Ontario, and then starting a week from Friday, basically, on June 1st for the rest of the province. So we want to get 20 hours, but we also want to get 25 point counts. And then when we're talking about how many squares we want to cover, that area in Southern Ontario that's shown in the darkest green, we're talking about 100% of our squares getting covered with those 25 point counts. And then even further north into the roaded north, that middle green layer, we're talking about 5% of all squares getting those 25 point counts, and then 2% of all squares getting that 25 point counts in the roadless north. So no small number that we're trying to accomplish, but those point counts are super important to help us achieve our atlasing goals. So there's lots of different ways to collect point counts. If you're doing them in person, you do need to be someone who is pretty much an expert. You need to really be able to identify everything that you're going to see or hear in that local area by sight or sound. So you need to know how to identify all those species if you want to do point counts in person. If you're not at that level, that's okay. You're still a great way you're going to be able to contribute. Caitlin's going to talk about that in the second half of the presentation. So a basic point count on the app. This is what it looks like when you're doing a standard point count. You'll see we have divided the tally into 2 time intervals. So the first time interval being the first, second, and third minute of a 5-minute point count, and then the second time interval being the 4th and 5th minute. This is really important. We split this up with this time interval because it allows us to compare and include data sets that have different timing periods. So for instance, the breeding bird survey uses 3-minute point counts. And by having these 2 time intervals, we're able to bring in those breeding bird survey point counts into the atlas and vice versa. So it's very simple. As you're doing your point count on the app, you start the timer. You see that in the top left. So you can keep track of what minute you're on. You just tap the number in the appropriate time interval for the species until you get to the number you need. So if there was 2 black-capped chickadees in the first time interval, you'd tap it twice. And then in the second time interval, there was 3 additional chickadees. So that's why there's a 3. If you want to add breeding evidence, we tell people to save them time. You don't need to add breeding evidence unless it's something higher than a possible code. So if it's a probable code or a confirmed code, then you can add it in, but don't worry about adding the H's or the S's. We're going to add those in as a default value at some point soon in the future. But if you wanted to, you tap on the species name, and that is where you can access the breeding evidence and details boxes. And very important for those of you who are doing point counts with the app, if you're going to save it as a draft before you submit it, so maybe you're doing the checklist in the field and then you're going to come home and review it before you submit it when you're back on Wi-Fi. Before you go and save it as a draft, don't forget to answer the question, was the station completed along the roadside first? Otherwise, you might forget, and the app has this funny little glitch where if you open up a saved point count checklist, it won't ask you that question before you submit it. So please make sure you do that. We're putting that reminder in all of our newsletters as well. Okay. There we go. You can also, lots of people don't like doing point counts on their phone because it's such an intense 5-minute period. They want to have as few distractions as possible. So lots of people do their point counts in a notebook, something like this. You still got the 2 time intervals as columns in this person's notebook. You got the name of the point count station up at the top, the date and time that you started. And then notice in this one again, like I said, don't worry about putting reading evidence code for everything. Mostly it's going to be H's and S's. If you get something higher level, like the carrying food Bob Link or the adult entering Cliff Swallow, then you can put those in so we know to upgrade those. Alrighty, next slide. Okay, now a little bit about finding where to do your point count. So every square in the Atlas has one of these PDF square map that you can download, use on your phone, or just print out. And all of these have, or they should have close to 40, up to 40 predefined point count stations. Those are those numbers 1 to 40 that are shown with the little black cross. Some of them may have predefined off-road point count stations as well. These are ones that were done in Atlas 2 that we're hoping to repeat. So those are those A and B in red letters with the red dot. So those 40 predefined roadside point counts are all basically random selected along roads. So those are the ones we want you to be focusing on first. We want people to do the first 20 of those predefined roadside point counts first. If it's not safe to do one of them, or the road doesn't exist anymore, or it's on private property and you can't access it, then you would skip that one and move on to the next, taking it from the next available number. So if you couldn't do point count number 11 because that road was closed, then you'd go and add number 21 to your list and hope that you can do that one. So we should hopefully have enough for you to get your 20 roadside done. As we said, I think I mentioned it earlier, we want to have those 20 roadside and then we want 5 off-road. There's a reminder of that on all of the square summary sheets or the square maps like you see here. So in that circle on the right-hand side, I've circled the goal is to have 20 predefined. Those are roadside and then 5 off-road. And the balance of those off-roads are divided up by habitat based on the habitat information we have for the square. So in this particular square, the goal is to have 4 off-road point counts conducted in broadleaf forest and 1 conducted in mixed forest. So yeah, that information is available on the square maps. You can also pull up the list of point counts on the Square Resources page. You can pull that up as a spreadsheet or a Google file. It can go into Google Maps, and it's also available through the Nature Counts app if you select point counts. Okay. So online data entry, if you collected your information in a notebook, it's fairly straightforward. The thing that trips the most people up is that we've optimized data entry for point counts so that with the assumption that you're going to do like several point counts in a morning. So we want you to do it all in one checklist. So keep that in mind and you'll have less trouble navigating the system. Essentially, you're going to start a general atlasing checklist. You can choose a route. If you drove along a road and did like 3 point counts, then you could draw your route along there, or you can also select an entire square. That's what a lot of people end up doing. The most important thing is you need to check off that you did complete Atlas point counts during your survey. Right, it's the last question basically before you get to the continue button on that first screen. Next. Once you've done that, then you'll be taken to the map that shows where the point count stations are in that particular square. And it's as simple as just clicking off the stations that you did. If there's a new station, then you just click the point on the map where it was. It'll start, as you click them, they get added to your list that you see here on the right. You'll have to add the start time for each individual point count. So in this case, I was out and I did point count number 11 at 6 a.m. Then I started point count 17 at 6:10, and then at 6:22 I started a new station that was not a predefined spot. So that one has the label of new. Feel free to change that to something that means something to you. And then also don't forget to check off that roadside checkbox just to the left of the trash can. If it was indeed a roadside, if you leave it blank, then you're telling us that it was an off-road point count. So don't forget to do that step. Next. And then you'll get to a screen like this. It looks a lot like a general atlasing checklist. The only difference being instead of just one column of numbers, you've now got each of the point counts with the 2 time interval bands. So you can add your counts, and so you can see some people like this because you can go through and do all of your mallard counts for all 3 of the point counts you did, or as many point counts as you might have done. Or you can just go through it 1 point count at a time, but you get to do them all on the same page here. There's also an overall count and a breeding evidence box. So you can include in that overall count box, you can include birds that you might have seen between point count stations. And then the breeding evidence, you can put the highest level of breeding evidence that you detected across all those point counts. Okay. So back to our notebooks. The second type of point counts are called 6 interval point counts. We sometimes call these advanced point counts. These are an optional way to do point counts. They do collect a little more information for us, but because of that, they take a little more effort. So if you don't want to put the extra effort in, that's totally fine. You can do the standard point counts the way I've shown already. But if you do want to do these 6 interval point counts, we still have the 2 time bands, the 1 to 3 minutes and 4 to 5 minutes, but this time we also use distance bands. So we want to know not only what time interval you saw a bird or heard a bird, but we want you to estimate how far away from you it was. So the first band being less than 50 meters, so nice close stuff, then 50 to 100 meters, and then greater than 100 meters. So in this notebook example, we're at point count station 17 in square 17 TNJ 51. The count started at 6:44 a.m. on June 15th. And we have our 2 time intervals, and then we have the 3 distance bands within each time interval. So this is why we call it the 6 interval point count format, because we have 6 different columns of data that we're collecting. So it's a handy way to do it. I think a lot of people that do it in their notebook do it this way with the 6 columns. Another way to do it, next screen, is you can use a data sheet like this, and it has a circle drawn on it. So same idea, except instead of doing things in a table format, you're doing things kind of like on a map, except it's just the circles showing the distance band. So the inner circle there is the less than 50, the middle band is 50 to 100, and then everything on the outside is greater than 100 meters away. This I definitely find is an easier way to record these 6 interval point counts. You can just draw on the map where you saw those birds, and then the format that people use is they underline birds that they had in the second time interval. So like that Savannah sparrow, kind of in the northeast quadrant in the middle band, was detected in the second time interval. Now, if you're going to enter those 6 interval point counts through the website, these are done through the special survey option, not general atlasing. And then you need to select your point when you start, and then go in and choose that it is the Atlas point count 6 interval. And then you're presented with a list similar to those tables that people were doing in their notebooks, where we have the 6 different columns of data that you can enter for any given species, and then the highest breeding evidence. So it's very similar to that table format in the notebook example. Now, the really cool thing is we've got a brand new feature with the app this year. So those of you who like doing the 6 interval point counts will be hopefully excited for this one. I'm very excited. This map-based 6 interval point count data entry with the app, it replaces the table-based format we had in previous years, which people found very, very cumbersome. And instead, you're presented with the circle map option. If you have a data connection while you're in the field, then you're going to be able to see all the landscape features and where they fall in relation to where you are and where the different rings are. So in this case, I'm standing at that little cross, and I see exactly on the map where the 50-meter band falls and where the 100-meter band falls. I just tap a spot on the map, and then I enter the species code, select the species, and it shows up there. The app takes care of the time interval because it knows exactly what time you tapped. So it does that for you. It calculates the distance bands for you as well, based on where you put the cursor when you tapped. So it does a lot of it for you. And I have to say, I have learned that I was not very good at estimating 50 and 100 meters before this app feature. So I hope you're as excited for this as we are. Okay, I'm going to turn things over to Kaylin.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Mike. I'm here to chat a little bit about digital point counts. So for those of you who are not familiar, digital point counts are essentially following the same sort of methodology as our traditional point counts, except you're using a Zoom H2N recorder. And so this is really helpful for atlasers who are not comfortable identifying birds by sound. So you could either be new to birding and bird identification, or some of our atlasers feel as though their hearing is going and that they can't identify birds to the same extent that they used to, and so they take on these digital point counts as well. So like I said, the methodology mirrors the traditional point counts, but recordings replace the in-the-field identification. So you go out with the recorder, you conduct the point count, and then you come home, you upload that data, and then the audio data is interpreted by bird experts who are able to identify what was there, what you were hearing, what the Zoom unit was hearing, and then all of that data is integrated into your Nature Counts account. So you're able to kind of compare notes, see what the bird experts found with the Zoom recorder, and then compare to what you had recorded yourself. So okay, so digital point counts are pretty much the same, except for you have this Zoom unit, and you need to tell the Zoom unit a few things so that we can identify where and when the recording took place. So there are a few things that you need to say at the very start of your point count. So you need to say your full name. This is so that we can attribute these recordings or these data to you after they've been interpreted. You need to say the date and time. So that's something that you would usually be recording if you were doing a traditional point count. You need to say the location, which can vary with predefined stations and new stations, which I'll touch on in just a second. And then you need to say start or stop. So you say start when you want the recording to start, and stop when you want it to end. And I'll just give you a little bit of a demonstration after I talk about predefined versus new stations. So a predefined station is a station that we have defined at the start of the atlas. It's a little bit self-explanatory, but anything that you see on these square resources that has a letter or number is going to be a predefined station. All of the numbers are going to be on-road predefined point counts, and all of the letters are the off-road predefined point counts that Mike was talking about earlier. And so I've just used that the red arrow here to show the different examples of predefined point counts. So in that case, what you would say is the square number. What you would say for the location would be the square number and then just the point number. So in this case, it would be 17 TPL22 and then point 22 or point A. are the two that I have the arrow on here. For new stations, a new station is any location that is determined by you. So these are typically new off-road point count stations. As Mike explained earlier, we want to have 5 off-road point count stations, and there aren't always predefined stations for off-road points in squares. So you might have to make a lot yourself, up to 5 point count stations yourself. So in this case, you'll want to say the square number and then the latitude and longitude. And this is so that we know where you were when you connected this new station. So any predefined station, you can just give us the point count number or point count letter. And then for any new station, give us the latitude and longitude. So an example would be, you come up to the point, you put down your Zoom recorder, you press record, and then I would say, this is Kaylin Bumelis. I guess right now it's 7:26 p.m., May 22nd, 2024. And then I would say this square, so square 717 TPL22, and then 0.22. And then I would walk a fair distance away so that we're not hearing me mouth breathing over the recording. And once I was a safe distance away, I would say start. And that's when that 5-minute chunk of time would start, that point count. And then at the end of 5 minutes, I would say stop. I would go to the recording unit. I would press the record button to stop it, and I would be on my merry way. So one thing that is new this year for these digital point counts is the Zoom log. Anyone who has done Zoom point counts before, this will be new to you as well. So to simplify the data transferred from wild tracks to nature counts, we're requesting that you guys maintain a log of your digital point counts, including the date, time, and location. I would maybe print the Zoom log that we've provided. It's going to be on the website. I'll talk about that in a minute. So I would consider either printing out this Zoom log that we're asking you to fill out, or just simply filling in your notebook to say the date, time, location, square number, lat, lon, station ID, and then the file name that you're going to be submitting when you upload that. And once you get home, you're going to put all of that into a spreadsheet, and you're going to send it along to us along with your audio files. And again, this is just so that we're able to make the connection a lot easier between the wild tracks files and what is being imported into nature counts into your data forms. So this is just a little look at the Zoom log, or potentially filled out Zoom log. We have the file name here. The recorder name is Mike. He has his nature counts login filled in here. The date, it's just hashtags there because the file, the column was a little bit too small. But the date, time, and location, so that's square ID, station ID, or lat lon. So you can download your audio data from the Zoom unit onto your computer once you get home. So you've filled out your Zoom log now. Now you've uploaded these files onto your computer. From there, you can either upload those onto FileZilla, which is a program that you would need to download onto your computer. We do have a YouTube video on how to do that. Or you can reach out to us if you're having trouble with this step. So you can either reach out to us or reach out to your regional coordinator, and we can set up a Google Drive for you to transfer the files so that we can get them onto FileZilla and ultimately into wild tracks for interpretation. And finally, you'll want to email us to let us know that your files are uploaded and to send us your Zoom log. So I've just kind of, that's a lot of info to take in, especially for those who might be new to digital point counts. So I've just made a quick 4-step thing here to kind of review what I've just talked about. So step 1, talk to your regional coordinator. So we want to know where you're doing point counts, and we want to not duplicate efforts. So the first step is always to talk to your RC and plan out your point count survey stations. Next step, you'll go out into the field with your recording device, and you'll conduct 5-minute point count surveys with the recorder. You can keep a checklist on your own if you'd like. Like I said, you can always compare back later, see what the recorder found and what the bird experts identified on there, and then see what you have in your own checklist. Make sure you keep a log of each point count as you go, your date, time, location, all of that information so that you can fill it out once you get home in the spreadsheet. Once you're home, you'll fill out the Zoom log spreadsheet based on your notes. And you'll download the audio files from the Zoom unit onto your computer, and then you'll upload them into FileZilla or send them to us, and then send us your Zoom log. So easy, 4 steps. If you ever have any questions, again, you can simply reach out to your RCs, reach out to Mike and I, we're more than happy to help with the technology. And there's also lots of handy resources on the Atlas website and on our YouTube channel. So the first is the Atlas website, which is birdsontario.org. I see it's cut off on Facebook right there, but I can put it in the chat in just a second on Facebook. It's birdsontario.org. Under tools and resources, you can either go to the instructions and forms, or you can go to point counts, which is under special surveys. And it will take you to a point counts page that goes over both traditional point counts and digital point counts. And we'll have a copy of the Zoom log on there. Also on the Birds Ontario website is this conducting a digital point count survey cheat sheet. So it talks about the equipment, it talks about the Zoom H2N device, talks about all of the settings that you'll want to have on there, as well as when to survey and what to say when you're surveying if you ever need a reminder. There's also lots of great resources on our YouTube channel. So that's youtube.com and then it's /@ONBirdAtlas. Or if you're on YouTube and you have the search bar there, you can just search for the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas. There's really great resources for both traditional point counts and for digital point counts. So some of them that I've highlighted here are conducting a digital point count survey on road, how to upload the digital point counts onto FileZilla. One of the videos on the top right is entering a 6-interval point count using the Nature Counts app. That's the one that Mike was just talking about. And then the bottom right is entering standard point counts online. These are just 4 of the videos that we have. I think we have at least 6, if not more, videos to help you with both traditional and digital point counts. So make sure to check out our YouTube channel. And with that, I'm going to just wrap up. Here's our website, a little bit easier for those on Facebook to see, birdsontario.org. And then the bottom right is our YouTube channel. The rest are social media, our email address, and then that's a QR code to also get to our website. So I'm going to stop sharing here and we'll take some questions.
All right, awesome. So I'm going to throw you a couple questions first, Kaylin.
Sure.
So there was a couple questions in the chat, so I want to get to those first before they disappear. Just a reminder, if you're on Zoom, put your questions into the Q&A, otherwise we might miss them. So the question that Jane has asked is, what if there are fewer than 20 or no point counts on the map? What do you do?
A great question. So we used some road layers that don't necessarily capture all the roads that are in existence, especially in Northern Ontario. So if you have new roads that are not captured by that road layer, then you can make new roadside point count stations. If there are not any new roads and you still don't have enough point count stations to get enough on-road, then you can supplement them with off-road point count stations, new off-road point count stations. So you can create new point count stations either on-road if that's available or off-road.
All right, I'm going to ask you one more, Kaylin.
Sure.
So this one's also from the chat, from Jane Ann. Sorry, Jane Ann. I called you Jane last time, but your name was cut off. So Jane Ann is asking about finding point count locations. Can you use Google Earth, or do you use Google Earth? So maybe talk about a couple ways to navigate to the spots.
Sure, I certainly can. There's lots of different ways to find the spots. The easiest way without having to have like a third party like outside of Nature Counts is that you can see the point count stations on Nature Counts if you select point count and then press edit location. That's one way. Another way is to use Avenza Maps. If you've ever used Avenza Maps before, you can download the PDF map and load it in there and use that to navigate around a square. Google Earth is a really great option as well. You can download the KML and KMZ files from Nature Counts, and you can import that either into Google Earth or Google Maps. We do have a really handy video on how to import those files into Google Maps and then how to navigate to them using your phone. So I would definitely check that out on our YouTube channel. But for those who are not aware of where to find all of these resources, I might just share my screen real quick and show you. Let's see. There we go. So I've just navigated to our website, again, birdsontario.org. Under tools and resources, you can go to mapping resources and then square resources. So I'll just click on that. I'm going to pick a square. This is my square. But you can either search for the square number if you know the square number, or you can zoom in. Not everyone has memorized square numbers like Mike and I, who look at this every day. So I'll just go ahead and zoom into the square that I was just looking for. Once you've zoomed in enough on a square, you'll see this red boundary come up. And then that's when these tools that are available for the square will show up on the right. So you can download the PDF map. You can download the point count coordinates in CSV format, GPX format for a GPS unit, or in KML CAMZ, and that's the one that works well with Google Maps. So all of these are great options. Again, I think the YouTube video on importing this into Google Maps is the one that I use the most personally.
Okay, thanks, Kaylin.
I think I can ask the question from Beth here.
Okay.
So Beth is going to be paddling in the Little North region. So peak breeding June 1st to July 10th, but the trips will be right before and right after those actual dates. So would Beth still be able to submit data, general atlasing data?
Yep, that's not a dumb question at all. That's an awesome question. And I'm glad you asked. Absolutely. We just don't conduct the point counts during outside of that window. And then when we're talking about the 20 hours that we're trying to get, those efforts that you do won't count towards those 20 hours, but it's still really valuable information for the atlas. Fills in breeding evidence for species, and we've got a lot of complex analyses that are going to happen. Some species, it's better to do those surveys either before or after. Those peak breeding periods are kind of arbitrary and are generalized for the most number of species, but lots of species have different breeding seasons. So absolutely, please do collect data while you're out on any of those trips, especially in the more remote areas. Those are places that we need as much information as we can. So that would be awesome. Enjoy your trips.
Yeah, you're getting a little bit quiet there, but I can still hear you, but other people might struggle a little bit more. I have another question. This one's from Facebook. So this is from Brenda. I think you're hooking up your headphones. So if you're not done in time, I can always answer this too. But Brenda did digital point counts in 3 squares last year, and the files were given to her RC, but the data does not appear to be uploaded yet. Is the data listed in a special survey tab? Should Brenda be concerned that the data has not been recorded yet? And I can always answer this one. That's okay. You're still figuring out the headphones, and that's totally fine. I can answer this one. So if the data is from 2023, do not be concerned that it's not yet on Nature Counts. We're still working on getting the data imported from Wild Tracks over to Nature Counts. So that should be done shortly. We're just figuring out some of that Latlon info, which is why we're hoping to get those Zoom logs done this upcoming season so that this process can happen even faster and that people are a little bit more prepared going into the field season next year. You probably missed most of that, Mike, so I don't know if I want to ask if you have anything to add.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I trust that you did.
No, that's okay. No worries.
Okay. Do you want me to ask you a question?
Sure.
Normally we have a third person here, folks, but we're close to the breeding season, so everybody's busy, and so Kaylin and I are taking turns asking each other questions. So Sheila has asked if we can show how to use the app for reporting the 3 distance tiers. So the 6 interval, the new map-based 6 interval. I don't know if you're hooked up for doing that live, Kaylin, but you can at least explain it.
Yeah.
And maybe it could even be an issue with Sheila doesn't have the updated version of the app yet too.
Yeah, I'm not connected just yet on my phone to my computer, but I can say that if you are using the latest version of Nature Counts, so on iPhones that's 6.0.1, and on Android phones that's 6.0, Under the select protocol, there should be an Atlas point count 6 interval option. And that's showing on both iPhones and Androids at the moment. So if you're not seeing it, it may be an issue of making sure your phone app is up to date.
All right.
And so Jane Ann is asking in the chat, point counts need to be 300 meters apart? Question mark.
It's another good question. So it depends what kind of point count. So I had this ready. I knew somebody was going to ask me this. So roadside point counts, they need to be 500 meters apart, and off-road stations need to be 300 meters apart. So we give you a little more allowance to squish those off-road point counts in 300 meters, but roadside should be at least 500 meters apart.
All right, and an anonymous attendee is asking, I'm a newbie. How does one get a Zoom recording device?
Good question. The regional coordinators, they all have some Zoom units that are available to be borrowed in their region. So as Kaylin said, we want you to be coordinating with those regional coordinators before you go out and do any of these point counts, whether they're in person or digital, just to make sure we don't duplicate people's effort. So that's part of the process anyways, but you can check in with them to see if they have a spare unit that's available, and if they don't, then they can request an extra unit from Kaylin and I, so we can get one in the hands of people who are going to use them.
Great.
Okay, on to some questions here. So I'm going to ask you a question here, Kaylin. I'm just going to take the first question here. Ernie is asking, Ernie has taken over a square from a previous Atlas participant. If the predefined off-road sites are on private property and you're not allowed access, what's the process there in terms of gaining permission or creating new off-road sites?
Yeah, that's a great question. For predefined off-road point count stations, during Atlas 2, it wasn't part of the protocol that everyone had to do off-road stations in every single square. So some folks just did it where it worked for them, and it's not still accessible to folks today. So what I would recommend is that if you can't get access, that's totally okay. Just make sure that you're following the square PDF map guidelines as to which habitats to put those off-road point counts in. Sometimes the off-road point counts that are predefined are not even in the right habitats. So that would be your first priority, is just to make sure that you're doing those in the appropriate habitats. It doesn't necessarily have to be revisiting those points.
Excellent. All right, I'm gonna ask you another one. This one comes from John. I'm not totally clear on what exactly the question. I think we might need John to chime in with some details, but maybe you can answer it. Maybe I'm just not understanding it. So John's asking, for digital counts, do you recommend uploading all counts over a longer period of time, say a couple of weeks, or after each day's outing? And actually, I think I understand the question after reading it.
Yeah, no worries. That's a great question. I would recommend, uploading them as frequently. It's a cost-benefit analysis of, are you going to forget the recording device in a forest somewhere versus uploading it every day and taking the time out of your day if you maybe don't have it. So as frequently as you can manage, that just makes sure that the data isn't lost somewhere. Make sure you put flagging tape on your recording devices. And so, yeah, it's really up to you, but yeah, as frequently as you can manage, I would say. All right, how about I can ask you, John has a follow-up question. How do you report visual sightings of birds during a digital point count?
Yeah, good question. So there's two different answers. So the one answer is you don't, and that's totally fine. If you're just want to do the digital recording, we know we're going to miss some things because those audio recordings do not tell us. We cannot hear a turkey vulture flying over usually, and those sorts of things. So we know there are birds we miss on those digital recordings. But one of the things we're trying to do is we are encouraging people to make their own list at the same time. So you can do a tandem point count while you're out in the field and conducting that digital point count. And that way you will at least be able to record the things that you see. If you're not comfortable doing that, that's okay. But for the people who do that, it helps us compare what we get on a real point count, an in-person point count, to a digital point count. And we've got our paid crews doing the same thing. So we've got a good data. We'll have a good data set at the end of the atlas to have a really good handle on, okay, these are the species that get underreported by people, and these are the species that get underreported by the handheld recorders. Every method has its pros and cons. So yeah, great question, but it's up to you whether you want to record those or not.
All right. Can you say a bit about how hours of effort are determined?
Yeah, sure. So on our Atlas website, we track hours split up a few different ways. So we track every time a checklist comes into the Atlas, whether it is a special survey or a point count or general atlasing checklist. We add those minutes up into hours, into thousands of hours. And we split those numbers up between the peak season, that starts May 24th in the south, and then June 1st further north. So you can look at total number of hours of all checklists combined, of all types, or you can look at just the peak season.
Awesome.
All right, I'll give you a couple here. Okay, somebody's wondering about their regional coordinator. Will the regional coordinator contact them, or should they reach out to the regional coordinator? If that's the case, then how do they find out who their regional coordinator is?
Yeah, I would say it doesn't hurt to reach out to your RC. You know, if you've just signed up for a region, if you've just moved, they might not have received a notification that you've signed up for their region. They should, but it doesn't always work out that way. So I would definitely say reach out to them. So the first step would be to go onto the Atlas website again, birdsontario.org. And then under the Atlas, or there's a couple different ways to find out who it is versus how to contact them. So I'll show you guys the website here. Share here. All right, here we are, Atlas website, birdsontario.org. Under Get Involved, there's a Contact Us page. I'll go ahead and click on that. And that will take you to the page that has all the contact information for the different regional coordinators of the different regions. If you're not sure which region you're in, we have this handy map here that you can zoom in on to figure out which region you're in. If you click on it, it will say the region name and it will say the contact information. If you want to know who it is, you can go ahead and either go to the Atlas and then Atlas team and regional coordinators, or from this page, there's a little thing that says for a complete list of regional coordinators. Click here, go ahead and click it. It's going to take a minute to load, I think, because it has a lot of pictures of RCs, but here we go. So it has the same map of the different regions and the contact information, but then it also has a list of all the regional coordinators for each region. So those are the two ways that you can see who's the RC for where you're at.
Awesome.
All right.
I lost my screen.
No worries. I have a question for you. Can you do point counts over several days?
Okay, yeah. So you cannot start a point count and like pause it at the 2-minute mark and then come back and do another 2 minutes and then pause it and come back and finish those 5 minutes. So those 5 minutes have to be continuous on the same day. But you can absolutely, most people cannot cover 25 point counts in a single day. That's especially if you're doing five off-road, that's basically impossible. So I'm very fast. I take great pride in my ability to jump out of the car, have my checklist basically ready to go, do my 5 minutes and get right back in the car and go to the next spot. And on a good morning, I can maybe do those 20 roadside, depending on the square. So absolutely, you can spread those out over over the course of the peak period that year, but you can even spread it out over the multiple years. So we only have 2 more years with the Atlas. We're into year 4, but a lot of people have taken a very methodical approach, and they've got a square that they're doing the point counts for. They've got 5 years to do those 25 point counts. So that's only 5 point counts across the 5 years. So it's becoming a bigger job for the squares that don't have any done now that we're down to the last 2 years, but absolutely spread it out. It's fun to just go do a couple point counts and go atlasing the rest of the morning if you want to do that. Whatever works best for you.
Great. So Ernie has another question. He says, if I've used eBird to log bird sightings and use the point count coordinates or station as the location, will this information be accessible by you? i.e., is there a link between eBird and the Atlas?
Okay, that's a good question. So there's kind of multi parts to the answer. So the first part of that answer is, so if you've done those counts in eBird, we can't use them as point counts because eBird doesn't allow you to split the count up into those 2 time bands that we need. But you can bring those checklists into the Atlas. We have an Atlas import tool. When you go to submit data, there's a little button that says import from eBird. So you can bring those in. They'll count as general atlasing, not point counts though. We hope to bring in some bulk eBird data, but we haven't figured out whether that's totally feasible or not, or how it's going to work. So I don't want to promise that at this point. I hope that we are able to do that, but the best solution is if you have data that's in eBird, we would love it into the Atlas, and you can use that eBird import tool to bring in the checklists. You have to do it one checklist at a time because there's extra data that we might ask you. There's things that you might not have been asked for extra details for in eBird, but you will be for the Atlas because we have different sort of quality control checks. We encourage you to add pins for the rare species you might have detected and things like that. So definitely would encourage you to import those checklists into the Atlas. And we can add in a link here. We have under tools and resources on the Atlas website, there is a page dedicated to eBird and the Atlas that kind of walks you through that process and just gives you sort of general information about how eBird kind of interacts with the Atlas. I'll pop it in the chat here. Okay. Let's see. Do I have any more questions that have been asked?
How close do you need to be to a point count station? So if stopping directly at the point count station is unsafe, how close do you have to be to it?
Yeah, good question. So there's lots of reasons you might not be able to get right to a station. Maybe you have a wonky GPS. Maybe the point count station is on the road and it's right at a bend in the road and it's not a safe place to stop there. The shoulder's too narrow or something like that. Some of the point count stations, whoever did the readings from Atlas 2, maybe they had a bad GPS and it's 15 meters off the road. So as long as you can get within 50 meters of the point count station, that's perfect, good enough for us. And if you're using the app, as long as you're within 50 meters when you're using the app, it'll actually select that. It would automatically select that point count station for your checklist anyway. So as long as you can get to 50 meters, that's great. If you can't get that close, then it's best to just scrap that point count station and move on further down the list.
How far off the road do the off-road point counts have to be?
Good question again. So if we're talking about off-road point counts, we want them to be at least 100 meters off the road. So the reason for that is we want the entire 100-meter radius of that point count to be within the same habitat. So we don't want you to have road habitat within that 100-meter circle. And so that would be the same if you were trying to put an off-road point count station, you know, like on the edge of two different habitats. We want you to get it entirely within that one habitat type. So if we asked you for broadleaf forest, then try to get that 100 meters within and entirely within broadleaf forest. That's not always possible. Nature doesn't always work nice and neat like that for us, but at least get 100 meters from the road so we don't have roadside habitat in there.
Great. All right, that was it for our Q&A. And we've got nothing else on Facebook either. If anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to speedily put them in the Q&A. Otherwise, I think we'll get wrapping up and let everyone enjoy their evening. Sunny here in Hamilton, but I know some places are not so fortunate right now.
Yeah. Okay, well, it looks like no more questions. I did want to give a couple announcements. Mainly that, as we've said a few times, peak season starts on the 24th. So it's prime time to get some atlasing done, especially if you're in Southern Ontario. We're looking to fill all those gaps that we still have remaining. Trying to get as much done this year as possible because I know we're going to be scrambling next year. There's a lot of events that are going to be happening over the next few weeks. Some of them are Atlas HQ events. We've got a few square bashes going on. So Kaylin and I will be down at Pinery this starting this Friday. And then there's the Bon Echo Square Bash. That one, we've got lots of volunteers for Bon Echo already. If you're interested in joining one of their Atlas HQ Square Bashes, the best one for you to join would probably be Mikisew at this point. And then there's a bunch of regional Square Bash events that are happening throughout the province. So I'm going to pop in a little link here. It's just birdsontario.org/square-bashes. And that's got a map that shows you where some of these events are happening. And we really encourage you to check those out. Try to join in on the fun in one of your local events if there is one happening near you.
Great. All right. Well, have a great evening, everyone. And again, this will be on our YouTube channel if you ever want to watch it back and there's something you missed or you just want a refresher.